Thanks to Indochino for keeping Legaleagle in the air and helping me look fly. Humans have been jetting off into space since April 12, 1961, when Russian Lieutenant Yuri Gagarin became the first human to orbit the Earth. Alan Shepard became the first American to enter space less than a month later. Yes, that's right, the Russians beat us to space by less than a month, but who's counting? We didn't want to be first in space anyway. It's cold and it's dark up there. Human space travel is just a couple of years shy of celebrating its 60th birthday, which means 60 years of weightlessness, freeze-dried food, and figuring out how to use the bathroom without any gravity. However, despite more than 50 years of humans traveling to and living in space, NASA has never had to address the issue of space pirates. No, I'm just kidding. Space crime. But space crime is really crazy and interesting too. What happens when a crime is committed in space? Who has jurisdiction? Who are the space police? And where is space jail? These are the questions we're going to answer today. Hey, Legal Eagles, it's time to think like a lawyer. And today we are dealing with potentially the first case of space crime. Summer Worden, a former Air Force intelligence officer, has accused her ex-spouse, Anne McClain, a decorated NASA astronaut, of identity theft and improper access to private financial records. When Worden became suspicious of McClain, she asked her bank to trace the location of any computers that had recently accessed her bank account using her own login credentials. One of those computers, it turned out, was in outer space aboard the International Space Station. Acknowledging that she had indeed accessed Worden's account while in outer space, McClain defended her actions and claimed that she was merely taking care of the couple's intermingled finances. Nonetheless, Worden filed a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission, and her family filed yet another complaint with NASA's Office of Inspector General. Both could be historic in that they contain the first allegation of criminal wrongdoing in space. So let's talk about the history of space law. The Treaty on Principles Governing the Activities of States in the Exploration and Use of Outer Space, including the Moon and other celestial bodies, or the Outer Space Treaty as it is more commonly known, was entered into by 105 different parties in 1967. The treaty was essentially the Magna Carta of space law. It established general principles for the international use of and exploration of space, favored commercial activities in space, and sought to ensure that the exploration of outer space could be conducted only for the benefit of all countries. Article 6 of the Outer Space Treaty also emphasized that all nations would, quote, bear international responsibility for national activities in space, whether these activities were carried out by governmental or private parties. Since entering into this international agreement, the United States has substantially developed its own national space law. Most recently, the extensive US space laws were recodified in 2010 in Title 51 of the US Code, which was enacted to transfer a number of statutes dealing with national space programs into a single place in the United States Code. While Title 51 addresses a number of space-related areas, it does not discuss criminal acts in space. Title 51 does, however, contain a blanket statement which presumably forbids any sort of criminal activity. Quote, "This civil space station may be used only for peaceful purposes." 51 USC section 70901. But what about the International Space Station? The International Space Station was placed into orbit in 1984 by the United States, and other nations were invited to participate in its development and use. In order to facilitate cooperation among the participating nations, Canada, the European partner states, Japan, Russia, and the United States signed the Agreement Concerning Cooperation on the International Space Station in 1998. Article 22 of the agreement also outlined criminal jurisdiction aboard the ISS and determined that each participating nation, quote, may exercise criminal jurisdiction over personnel in or on any flight element who are their respective nationals. But what actually happens when a crime is committed on board the ISS? To date, we're still not entirely sure. But in discussing criminal jurisdiction in space, many scholars have equated intergalactic crimes with those committed in Antarctica or at sea in an attempt to consider what actual development space law would look like, and of course, to avoid common pitfalls. By way of analogy, the Antarctic Treaty was signed in 1959 by 12 nations whose scientists had been working on the continent. To date, there are a total of 54 parties to that particular treaty. Similarly to the respective jurisdictional rules which govern the International Space Station, The Antarctic Treaty provides that, quote, observers, scientific personnel, and members of the staffs accompanying any such persons shall be subject only to the jurisdiction of the contracting party, of which they are nationals in respect of all acts or omissions occurring while they are in Antarctica for the purpose of exercising their functions. So, if you are a U.S. national doing research in Antarctica, the treaty seems to imply that you are governed by the rules of the United States while you are domiciled in Antarctica. And by analogy, if you're in the ISS and you commit a crime, you're governed by the laws of the United States. Still, the drafters of the Antarctic Treaty left a lot of questions unanswered, and when in 2000, an Australian astrophysicist died in the South Pole, the nations involved were unsure how to confront the fact that he was likely poisoned. After Dr. Marks unfortunately passed away, an autopsy was performed and methanol was found in his system. For those of you who don't have advanced degrees in toxicology, which I will assume is most of you, including myself, methanol is a colorless liquid that smells a lot like ethanol, otherwise known as alcohol, but that is far more toxic. So the question remained, did Dr. Marks knowingly ingest a highly toxic substance, or was he poisoned? The United States had an interest in investigating the death since Marks died on a US base and was an employee of an American contractor. New Zealand maintained its own interest in investigating Marks' death since it considered the location of the US base to fall within its own territorial claim. One officer from New Zealand who handled the case stated that he could not rule out that the scientist's demise was the direct result of the act of another person in the base. However, despite those suspicions, unresolved jurisdictional questions, competing jurisdictional claims, and conflicting interests prevented anyone from ever getting to the bottom of Dr. Marks' death. To this day, no one knows if he died by murder, suicide, or an unfortunate accident. In a similar way, international waters pose similar jurisdictional questions and conflicts with those raised in Antarctica and in space. Maybe at some point this will have to be an additional video, because if I had a nickel for every time a Legaleagle asked me to cover maritime law and the law of the high seas, I would be a very, very rich man. At the United Nations Conference on the Law of the Sea, held in 1958, certain provisions were adopted to regulate activities in international waters. Articles 5 and 6 respectively state that, quote, ships have the nationality of the state whose flag they are entitled to fly. In particular, the state must effectively exercise its jurisdiction and control in administrative, technical, and social matters over ships flying its flag. And, quote, ships shall sail, that's so hard to say, under the flag of one state only, and shall be subject to exclusive jurisdiction on the high seas. Oh, I'm so glad I was able to say that correctly. A fugitive or criminal sailing on a ship in international waters is therefore subject to the laws and regulations of whatever country the vessel is registered to. The United States can also exercise special jurisdiction in international waters, such as when, quote, any place outside the jurisdiction of any nation with respect to an offense by or against a national of the United States, end quote, is involved. Despite the uncertainty that still surrounds space law, however, many say that with the onset of space tourism, we'll soon have no choice but to expand the laws that govern the International Space Station. And frankly, that's how our law was created in the first place. American law is a subset of English common law, which means that the law was created basically as judges went along. They got a new case, and when there were new facts that had to be adjudicated for the first time, they just kind of made it up as they went. In contrast to a lot of the civil law societies in Europe, where the law is codified and judges just simply follow that and they never have discretion in terms of creating new common law on their own. And the funny thing is that when you're in law school, you read a ton of railroad cases, because in the 18th and 19th centuries, trains were the newfangled technology of the day and required courts to wrestle with new legal principles to deal with new legal situations. So really, when you think about it, rocket ships and international space stations are just the trains of today, without wheels, in space. And as Mark Sundahl of the Global Space Law Center said, the more we go out there and spend time out there, all the things that we do here are going to happen in space. Since Worden and her family filed their complaints against McClain, an investigator specializing in criminal cases with NASA's Office of Inspector General has begun to look into the issues surrounding these novel circumstances. While no charges have been filed, a seemingly trivial domestic dispute could get the ball rolling and push the US, and presumably other space powers, to take a hard look at their interstellar criminal laws, or lack thereof. You know, before we know it, everything that happens down here on Earth will eventually happen in space. And while that may eventually mean shopping on the moon and yoga on Mars, it could also very well mean crime that's out of this world. Now, if you go into space, you'll need a spacesuit, but if you're back here on Earth, you need an actual suit. If you're looking for a custom slim cut suit that is shockingly affordable, I can't recommend Indochino highly enough. Indochino. By now, you guys know the drill. I love my Indochino suits, and I negotiated a special deal for Legaleagles. All of my suits are now custom made by Indochino, including this gray 2-button that I'm wearing right now, which was custom made just for me. See, the secret to a great suit is all about the fit. I'm a reasonably athletic guy, and I can never buy suits off the rack because they just simply never fit right. If the shoulders fit, then the waist is way too small. It either doesn't fit or it costs a ton to have a tailor fix it. But with Indochino, you can send in your measurements online, or you can go to one of their stores and have a stylist take your measurements for you. For me, I made an appointment, went to the store in person, had a stylist work with me for over 90 minutes when I went in for the first time. My personal stylist, Andrew, took my measurements, and a couple of weeks later, I got the best fitting suit of my entire life. It was perfect right out of the box, and if it hadn't been, they would have tailored it for me until it was perfect. Indochino will make you a fully custom tailored suit specifically for you for less than $400. And the best part is they still use the best materials like Super 140's wool. In fact, I asked Indochino to give Legaleagle specifically the best deal possible, and they're giving you guys the exclusive ability to buy any premium suit for $359. That is the best deal you will find anywhere on the internet. I will never get an off-the-rack suit again, and once you try it, believe me, neither will you. Legaleagles can get any premium Indochino suit for just $359 when you enter the promo code Legaleagle at checkout or use the link in the description. Clicking on the link really helps out this channel. That's Indochino.com, promo code Legaleagle, for the best custom suit of your entire life. So, do you agree with my analysis? Are you worried about space crime, or do you think the current laws already deal with it? Leave your objections in the comments, and check out this playlist over here for all of my other real law reviews where we cover all of the legal topics of the day, where I will see you in court.